Hey everybody, John here, obviously. And we are at the cusp right now. I think a few people have received this. The cusp of widespread availability of the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'm just doing a little PSA here. Because there's been a lot of loose talk, a lot of speculation and worry and gossip, social media channels and other places, talking about this brand new, rushed to development, but miraculous and 100% perfectly safe treatment or preventative treatment for COVID-19, which might or might not work, or might give you only temporary immunity. And I just would like to assure and reassure everybody that the COVID-19 vaccine is 100% perfectly safe and won't place you at any risk. Now, there's a number of ways that you can tell, in advance, that the COVID vaccine is 100% perfectly safe. The first way is that because nobody has received this drug yet, or almost nobody has received this drug, there's almost nobody who has any negative side effects. There's been no deaths that we know of. There's been no long-term consequences. There's exactly zero long-term negative consequences from this drug, this brand new, rushed to development, miraculous and 100% safe drug. There's no long-term negative side effects because there's no long-term, right? It hasn't been around for there to be a long-term, therefore there's no long-term side effects. Therefore, it's perfectly safe. My logic is impeccable. Another way that you can tell, a related way that you can tell that this is totally safe, is that there's no widespread coverage in the mainstream media of serious side effects of this drug. Like, nobody is talking in the mainstream channels where they're telling you have to take it, that there's a negative consequence. So the authorities who are telling you what's true and what's not true, sometimes in defiance of your eyes, sometimes in defiance of logic and defiance of reason. But logic and reason, if they're your logic and reason, you shouldn't trust them. You should only trust the logic and reason of the authorities. Authoritative truth is the real truth. The truth that you can see with your eyes, if it doesn't conform to authoritative truth, is not true. But because on the media, mainstream news, CTV News, CBC, which is the state broadcaster, they are not telling you that there's large numbers of negative, side effects or medical catastrophes. First of all, there can't be, because there's almost nobody has received this drug yet. Therefore, because nobody has any negative consequence, it must be 100% perfectly safe. But also, because they aren't telling you about any negative consequences in the mainstream channels, therefore there are no negative consequences, and therefore it's perfectly safe. Now, those are the first two obvious ways of telling that this is 100% perfectly safe. You should take it. The next way that you can tell in advance, before this has been tested, before there's any actual evidence, the way that you can tell that this is perfectly safe is that unlike other drugs and treatments for various different ailments that sometimes do have negative consequences and which are voluntary, that the medical profession basically never uses coercion to force people to take a treatment that they don't feel comfortable with, they don't like, or they weigh up the risks and the possible rewards, and they say that this is not a good gamble. Unlike in those cases, and there is a threat from a lot of different levels of government and public officials saying that some or all of your civil liberties, your ability to travel, your ability to continue to go to work, to have a job, but there seems to be some pretty wide-scale and serious threats against the closure of individual people's civil liberties if they don't take this brand new experimental, not yet fully tested, and with no track record, brand new experimental drug. And because in the rest of our lives, drugs that have a history, drugs that have a track record, that have been properly tested, sometimes do have negative consequences, and those are voluntary to participate in. This is you might be forced to do this, therefore it's perfectly safe, because they would never force you to do something that had a negative consequence. I mean, you're only ever going to be forced by government to do things that are 100% totally reliable. Government doesn't make mistakes like that, so you know it's perfectly safe. The last way, I mean, there's probably more. These are just the ways that seem obvious to me, that tell me that this is a perfectly safe, 100% reliable, no hazard drug for you to participate in. Is like, it isn't being first given to people who the elites might view as disposable human beings. Like, if you are extremely rich and extremely powerful in the top hierarchy of our society, you might view certain people as like the poor, the little people, that negative things happen, we don't care, they're disposable people. So we can tell that this is not being given to the most disposable people, like, you know, like the elderly. Oh, they're going to die soon anyway, so who cares what happens to them now? No, like, obviously they would give this drug if it was like dangerous to the disposable people, but if it's perfectly safe, which it is, then the high-ranking, the rich, the famous, the elite, and the powerful would be the very first people to take it publicly to demonstrate to everybody else, hey, look, it's perfectly safe. Justin Trudeau would go on, you know, like the CBC and on 6 o'clock, and he'd that would be video, and everybody would see that he had received this injection, and Chrystia Freeland would receive it. They'd go on the news, it would be a big spectacle, and everybody would, oh, look at these guys are taking it and they're perfectly fine, and everybody else would feel great about taking it. Oh, look, Justin Trudeau got it and he's fine, and then I guess I'll take it too. So, you know, obviously Justin has done that, and that video's out there somewhere. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure he's done that, and it's not just being like given to like the elderly who might be viewed as disposable by people who are like cynical and extremely rich and highly placed, and sort of see themselves as above everybody else. You know, not that we would view our own grandparents and parents as disposable experimental lab rats, but, you know, you can see that somebody who was like multiple tiers in wealth and power and status and political influence above us, like common dirty pedestrians, they might view the elderly living in care homes, you know, who don't have a lot of money and might be, you know, don't have very many years left to live because they're really elderly. They might view those people as disposable, and if they just gave it to those people first without first taking the drug themselves, then we might think that there was maybe some problems. And I'm sure that Justin has taken the drug himself, and Chrystia Freeland has taken it. Like that, there's a video out there on the CBC website or something. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure it's there. Anyway, I would just like to reassure all of you that this brand new, untested, rushed to completion, experimental, but miraculous and perfectly safe drug is perfectly safe, and you should all take it. Otherwise, you know, you won't be able to travel, and you might not be able to keep your job, and your bank account might get closed, and other negative things. But it's perfectly safe, and we would never threaten. You would never be threatened to be forced to participate in an experimental medical treatment if it wasn't perfectly safe, because the government doesn't make mistakes like that. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and as always, have a lovely, lovely day.